Hi D&D fans, I'm Sparkle's Devil Monster, and tonight I'm reviewing issue number 7 of Dragon Magazine. Tonight we have the Dragon's Birthday Party. So it's the Dragon's Birthday Party because Dragon Magazine, when it initially came out, was a bi-monthly magazine, and this is the 7th edition, so it's exactly 1 year later. And here we have a red dragon, more of a pink dragon in the picture, chowing down on the remains of an adventuring party and picking his teeth with a short sword. You can see he is in his lair, spotlighted, surrounded by treasure. And there's at least a couple of spears there, maybe a polearm, a mace, a battle axe, a shield, and lots of skeletons of adventurers and loot. When I do these reviews, I always look first for a few NPCs I might use in my 5th edition game. And Dragon number 7 has a few NPCs, but none of them are ones that I would particularly use. They're worth taking a look at anyway, though, just so we can track the evolution of the state of the art of dungeon mastering. So our first NPC is a wizard named Tonal, which I think is a kind of a foolish name for a villainous wizard. He doesn't see reason very easily, and he is really into grappling, maybe while flying over the abyss. So let's take a brief look at Tonal. As his memory of Tonal had guided his past, it now taught him the proper course. He let the form become itself without evaluating. The mage watched in a state of pure experience while his image took form on the opposite brink. Perhaps this is the mirror image, then, of the protagonist. Together, they said, "I know you." Together, throwing aside their staves, they leaped to the center of the abyss. Together, they grappled. Each was perfectly matched, of course. The struggle was long. The sky assumed uncounted colors as they strove for mastery of their fate. Well, it's a little more interesting now that I can see that this is the mirror image of the wizard protagonist. I remember enjoying Final Fantasy II, the American Final Fantasy II, because the protagonist, the Dragoon Cain, a kind of black knight or anti-paladin, had to fight his mirror image in order to become good and become a true holy paladin, a true holy warrior. That was fun. I could see that working in a D&D game. Still, though, I don't like that they spelled wizard W-Y-S-A-R-D. Wysard. All right, next up, an ally. We have a nice picture of potential allies on page 23. And these guys look like maybe mercenaries or hirelings of a sort. They are kind of like conquistadors, maybe Roman legionnaires, explorers of some distant land, colonizers, imperialists. And it seems like it would be good to have a few of these men-at-arms with you on just about any journey, especially one that involved conquering the savage wilderness. So there's a potential ally, and I bet they would work fairly cheaply, but perhaps would be low level and have few hit points, and maybe a middling armor class. All right, so another NPC from Dragon number 7. At this moment, the group topped a nearer hill. Dunstan strained his gaze in the failing light, and suddenly the figure seemed to grow larger, just as Mellard had explained. Great gods! expostulated the startled errant. "It is a dwarf, being pursued by a pack of giant toads and weirdly hopping men." Okay. A dwarf being pursued by giant toads and weirdly hopping men. It's funny. It'd be a funny random encounter. I just don't think it'd be the best NPC to add flavor to my world. Speaking of adding flavor to the world, on page 8, we have America's Stonehenge, Mystery Hill, just outside North Salem, New Hampshire. And you can see a nice drawing of Mystery Hill. I haven't tried Googling it, but this is a real place. And there's another drawing here, which perhaps adds a little more detail. But again, they're just kind of like a jumble of rocks. So not as cool as the real Stonehenge, but the article makes it out to be something quite spectacular and on the same level, perhaps even more ancient than Stonehenge, and equally mystical, maybe used for stargazing, astrology by ancient native peoples. So you could have something like that in your game. I'm currently running Curse of Strahd, and my players last session completed Yester Hill. There are druids atop the hill, tall black boulders, much in the nature of Stonehenge, and as it is cursed Barovia, lightning is striking each of the pillars as the druids rise out of their earthen graves and attack. So that was kind of cool. You could have a stone circle in your game, I suppose, to add some flavor to the world. Next, I look for something that I can put in my dungeons. And again, issue number 7, even though it's the birthday edition of Dragon Magazine, one of my favorite magazines, it just didn't do it for me. The only thing I could find in terms of spicing up dungeons or combat encounters was this description of military formations of the universe. And here you go. Here's some military formations. I feel like if I really wanted to get into military formations, I would just maybe read some military history, or, I don't know, draw some basic geometric shapes like squares and lines and triangles. I can do that myself already. Here's a diamond-shaped military formation they call the crystal square. Concentric circles. I don't know. I guess if you have large-scale battles, it's important to have some military formations. But really only for those special moments that matter for the story. Like when as the DM you're able to trick the players into pursuing a foe, and then they go deep into the enemy territory and the enemy comes from both sides and envelops them and tries to cut off their escape route. And then the military formation serves a narrative function. But most of the time it doesn't really. So I think we can safely skip Dragon Magazine's military formations. However, there was a cool monster in here. And it wasn't actually like the featured monster, which I gotta say is really dumb looking. And I love Aerolotus, but that's just, it's like the creeper or something. I'm not into it. I did, however, like the Griffin. There's a very cool Griffin depicted on page 11, and then it features prominently in a piece of fiction. You can see the Griffin there swooping towards the point of view, or perhaps towards this wizard in a tower over a walled hilltop city. And 5th edition has Griffins. They are indeed quite rad. I took my Harry Potter test, and I tested as Gryffindor, House Gryffindor, with the sorting hat. So here's a Griffin. And the Griffin has a low armor class, only a 12, 59 hit points, and deals 19 points of damage on average a turn. So that means it'd be about 3 turns or 18 seconds for one Griffin to tear apart another if they scored hits on all the attacks with the beak and the claws. They're also very perceptive. So perhaps you can have a Griffin soaring above, looking out for danger and then alerting, if you're in water deep, the constable riding on his back as to the ne'er-do-wells and scalawags in the city streets below. So the Griffin. Darkness came to Elmere on the wings of a griffin. Cool billows of cloud and gray and umber followed the beast as its gray wings furrowed the heavens, obscured the opalescent skies, and cast shadows on impossible peaks in the far below. The Griffin soared, nearing Overos. And here they spell Griffin Gryphon, as opposed to the now standard Griffon. Feel free to use whichever one you like. After all, you're the dungeon master. It's your game. All right. So then I was looking for a spell, and the only spell I found was back in the story where this wizard, Visakyu, fights his double, Tonal, and the battle's not going that well. Sometimes you really just can't beat yourself. You're your hardest foe. Beat yourself up too much. So he has to teleport away. And the teleport spell takes him to a cavern, which I won't describe now. It's sort of your standard cavern with an underground lake. Then he meets some other NPCs and continues the adventure. But in-game, use of the teleport spell to escape battle, to me, is a symptom of power creep. When your players are having their characters teleport away from the most climactic fights, either they weren't that interested in the outcome of the fight, or they've just grown so powerful they're able to do that all the time, and you don't want them routinely teleporting away from these dramatic climax moments of your game. So not too much a fan of teleport for that purpose. I like teleport when you are able to have maybe an NPC archmage teleport the party somewhere, or they go through a portal to another plane of existence, and they're able to skip long, boring sections of travel of the sort that bogged down Horde of the Dragon Queen in 5th edition. So, a magic item? Yeah, not so much. Again, sorry, but Dragon number 7 has numbered jumping beans in the section What to Do When the Dog Eats Your Dice. One of the humorous, I put that in quotes, scare quotes, suggestions is to number your jumping beans and just use those as random number generators. Not too funny. All right, but finally, there is something quite good. And so this is an addition to the excellent cover art of the Dragon's Birthday Party. I enjoyed that, and our friend the Griffin. Gary Gygax has an article right off the bat here on page 7 on the origins of the game. The most frequently question asked at seminars, which I have given on Dungeons & Dragons, is, how did the game originate? Because of the frequency of this question and the involved nature of the reply required, I thought it a good idea to once again put it in writing. So here, for the first time in Dragon Magazine, is Gary Gygax's explanation of how he invented our favorite role-playing game. He also has it in the foreword to the original ODR box set release, what I lump in with the rest and call first edition. So he explains he was a member of the Castle and Crusade Society. They played war games. They used the medieval rules chainmail, which Gygax worked on. And one of his players, Dave Arneson, was a member of the Castle and Crusade Society and established a barony in the northeast corner of the map, which he called Blackmore. just above the Great Kingdom that Gygax designed. And he began expanding from there and filling in the map with his adventures. They used a large number of 40mm figures, many of them so heroic looking that the players were inspired to give them experience points and level them up and play a kind of swords and sorcery adventure game with them. Dave Arneson created some additional rules to track the experience and gave Gary 18 or so handwritten pages of rules. And then Gary Gygax transformed that over a year later, working day and night, into nearly 300 manuscript pages, handwritten pages written in the wee hours of the morning and on weekends, as well as at night after his children had gone to sleep. The first D&D, as opposed to variant chainmail dungeon adventurers, were Ernie Gygax, Don Kay, Rob Kuntz, and Terry Kuntz. And then he lists some other players who joined them. They all contributed to the final form of the game. There were 3 character classes, with players beginning at first level. Each level was given a heroic or otherwise descriptive name. So that's been dropped in later editions, but back in first edition, every time you gained a level, you gained a new title, almost like having a subclass. So they were all enthusiastic. Eventually, the Blackmoor portion of the map and the Great Kingdom portion of the map combined and became the well-loved Greyhawk campaign setting. That was the first campaign setting of Dungeons & Dragons. And Gary Gygax ends this section. Thus, D&D was released long before I was satisfied that it was actually ready. I am not sorry that we decided to publish then instead of later, even though I've often been asked I've often been taken to task about it since, and I hope all of you feel the same way too. You can, however, rest assured that work on a complete revision of the game is in progress, and I promise a far better product. So we have that far better product today in the form of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, the world's greatest and most popular role-playing game. And I hope you enjoyed today's review of Dragon number 7. And I promise far greater issues to come. Good night.